Hello everyone, welcome back to my series on Calvinism. Today we are going to go over the third point of Calvinism, which after this quick recap here, obviously Calvin, ceiling fan, we are obviously well acquainted by now. Third point is limited atonement. So I've written a definition here, which is the idea that Christ's death was sufficient for all to go to heaven, but only efficient for some. That's the elect. The difference between sufficient and efficient doing the heavy lifting there, of course. Now, I would like to bring up a passage here, which is John 10:11. Now, doing my research, this is a passage that came up a little bit, as it apparently shows proof for the Calvinist argument, which, upon first glance, it does seem to be that way. So, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep, obviously being said by Jesus. Now, the reason why this supports this Calvinist idea is Christ is saying he is the good shepherd, of course, and that he lays down his life for the sheep. Now, the sheep being the elect. That's the Calvinist interpretation, or at least according to my research, that is. Feel free to correct me in the comments if I get any of this wrong, of course. I'm learning along with everyone else as I research for these videos. So I would like to counter this Calvinist point. Of course, there is a Catholic perspective, which I will now bring up and use Matthew's Gospel. This is Matthew 28:19, and I will use this part to support the Catholic idea. So, go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. I'm sure everyone has read both of these at least a million times. If you are a practicing Christian, you probably heard it at Mass or a Sunday sermon or whichever denomination you're in. Very common verses for general Christian belief. So, the reason why this supports the Catholic view of the gospel message is here Christ says, make disciples of all nations, not some disciples from the nations, but disciples of all nations, nations being collectives of people that govern themselves in geographical areas, or however you wish to define the term. I don't really think we need to split hairs on the definition of nations here. It's quite clearly that Christ is talking about large bodies of people and to not discriminate between any of them. There is neither Jew nor Gentile. There's another verse I could bring up here, but this is the one I wrote down because this is a slightly longer verse and I didn't want there to be as much negative space in the screen. Anyway, so Christ here is obviously talking about all nations, the argument being that why would he tell his disciples, the apostles, and his followers and such, the lovely voice crack there, the people who would come to be known as Christians, why would he tell them to go and baptize everyone, i.e., as the apostolic churches teach, baptism washes away sins, so why would he tell his disciples and followers in that to wash away the sins of everybody and to bring them in communion with the church and to make them Christian if he's only going to save some of them? Now, there is a little bit of credence to the Calvinist argument, which is technically, on face value, this is kind of correct, in that there are Christians that will be going to hell. Most people will go to hell, and that includes some Christians. So technically, this is sort of by literal definition correct. The difference being that the Calvinist position is that only some people will get into heaven because Christ chooses that for them before they are even created. If you remember the previous videos, that is the idea that Christ chooses the elect, and that choice is made before before the elect are even created, before they do anything, before they are made by God, before they come into being. Now this, of course, looking at this verse from a Catholic perspective, would contradict that, in that Christ is very clearly telling his followers to go out and to baptize everybody, not just some people. And it seems that if he did not give the choice for all of those whom hear his name and hear the gospel to perhaps go to heaven, that would be inefficient and pointless in a way, that he would go out of the way to have people baptized whom he knows he's not going to save from his by his sacrifice. Now, I've drawn this timeline here. Oh, there's the image. Okay, so this is now my profile picture. It was the larger picture of the heart. I've changed it to this. I will try not to just change the image for this channel every single time I draw something that I like, but I thought that this was a better drawing, a little more simplistic, but still had, I suppose it still had even more going on. So I think I might keep this one for a while. He says until the next video comes out. We'll see. But anyway, so I drew this timeline, this being obviously the crucifixion. We have the Sacred Heart of Jesus on the cross there with a nice halo behind it. I thought that was quite cool. Anyway, this... Another voice crack. Wow, I need to drink more water. Anyway, this obviously happens. Let's say if this is today. This could really be any point after the crucifixion, but let's say this is today. So this being 2,000 years ago, these two people here, they are obviously existing 2,000 years after the crucifixion of Christ. They have not been created at the time. That's 2,000 years in the future from this point. And Christ has already decided, as God, eternally, that this person is part of the elect and this person is not, before they're even made. And I've covered the problematic nature of that view in the two previous videos. And I would like to point out how it seems from a Catholic perspective to contradict Matthew's gospel here, and how you can also interpret this part of John's gospel as the sheep being people who are members of the church, but also anybody who hears the gospel and anybody who is part of the all nations. And the sheep that Christ shepherds, of course, we're told that not everyone in the church will go to heaven, and as such, the term sheep could still be being used to describe just general people who hear the word of the Lord. So here we have the ceiling fan confirming that this... I always laugh at ceiling fan. I need to get better at that. Anyway, here we have the ceiling fan confirming that this person is part of the elect, and I've made a point that they're both wearing crosses, they're both Christians, but not to do with any of their own actions. One of them will be going to heaven and one of them will not be. Now, as a final point, I'd like to bring up a theologian who I can't believe I haven't talked about yet. That is Thomas Aquinas. So I've got a quote from the Summa here. This is part 3, question 48. And what does the A stand for? Let me remember. Article 6. There we go. Right, there we go. So Aquinas writes, "Therefore Christ's actions and sufferings operate for the salvation of men. Consequently, Christ's passion accomplishes man's salvation efficiently." I chose this specific passage from the Summa because it uses the word efficiently, which is used here at the end here, so I thought it tied in quite nicely. But the whole question 48 in part 3 is all about why Christ dies and what that does for people. And Thomas Aquinas clearly has the opinion that he dies for everybody. And like the ladder analogy in my first video, I think it was, on this topic, where God's grace, and in this instance, the sacrifice of Christ, is the ladder coming down. It is then our choices that define whether we get on the ladder or not. As such, the ladder is efficient for us to climb, but we have to choose to climb it, which aligns perfectly with the Catholic position on the two gospel verses that I brought up first. Now, of course, I'm not saying that this is that the Summa is part of the Bible or anything, or that it's divinely inspired. It's simply I wanted to bring up Thomas Aquinas, and I believe he's quite a smart man, and the Summa has pretty much answers for any theological questions that the average Catholic, or just average Christian in general, might have. I don't know whether this has been a shorter or longer video than usual, but that's all I have for this topic. I will probably in the next 3 or 4 days I'll come out with part 4, so stay tuned for that. But thank you for watching. God bless, like and subscribe, and please have a blessed day.